I am Sarah Beardsley. Welcome to Arts After Dark. I'm the president of Arts Medford as well as a member of the MARV team. And Arts Medford is a volunteer run nonprofit that nurtures creativity, supports artists and the arts, and works to reflect the diverse community of Medford, Massachusetts. We make art more accessible to all by removing barriers to participation and bringing programs into the community. I want to welcome you to Arts After Dark, a series of virtual events put on by MARV, the Medford Arts Resource Vehicle. As you may know, MARV is an arts center on wheels, bringing supplies and inspiration to local neighborhoods. We are delighted to be collaborating on this event with the Gallery 57 in Malden, Massachusetts. It's a group of artists, artisans, and cultural entrepreneurs selling high quality handmade products in their retail shop in Malden, as well as online. The gallery is committed to building community through arts commerce. Arts After Dark is supported in part by a grant from the Medford Arts Council, a local commission that is supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the City of Medford, as well as Arts Alive Medford Foundation, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and generous individuals. We also want to acknowledge that Medford is part of the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Pawtucket, Wampanoag, and Massachusetts peoples. The Mystic River is a modified form of the Algonquin name Missituck, meaning Great Tidal River, in reference to the Mystic's tidal waters. This acknowledgement offers recognition and respect to the original caretakers of this land and their descendants today, especially since the indigenous history of our region has been largely erased for the last 400 years. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy this event. So I'd like to introduce to you our artist for tonight, who is Michelle Trammel. Michelle's been working with glass since 2001. She's a glass blowing instructor in the MIT Glass Lab, which I'd love to go see sometime, Michelle. She has a passion for the material and the process and shares her love for the art through glass blowing demonstrations, teaching, and collaboration. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michelle, and a piece of housekeeping to please stay muted, and then there will be time for questions and answer at the end of Michelle's presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening, and thank you to Medford Arts for the opportunity to talk to everybody this evening. I'm going to be talking and showing you some pictures of a bunch of my work, and then there are some frequently asked questions that I get for whenever I tell somebody that I'm a glass blower. There are some questions that come up all the time, and then I'll be happy to field any questions that you all have as well. I know a number of you. Thank you for all my friends and acquaintances for tuning in. Let's see. So I'm going to be talking about hot glass. Hot glass because the furnace I work out of runs at approximately 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a picture of me in the MIT Glass Lab, which is on the basement level of the Infinite Corridor, for those of you who know the MIT campus. That's me making a fairly large piece, large for me at any rate. And you'll see the finished piece in a subsequent picture. But what I'm doing there is I'm using what we call the fluffy torch, because the flame is kind of broad and fluffy looking, to keep the attachment glass warm, the glass that is attaching that metal rod that my left hand is turning to the bottom of the vase. And there's a big smile on my face because this piece was about to go into the annealer and I was very happy with it. And yeah, so let's see. So I'll be talking about the things that I make, which kind of breaks down into functional work like cups, bowls, and vases, sculptural work, which can be, pretty whimsical, like shells and octopi and pumpkins and things like that, and then a couple of other projects. And then I'm gonna go through some frequently asked questions that I get when people find out that I'm a glass blower. So first, cups. As a glass blowing instructor, we spend a lot of time teaching people how to make cups. Making a cup, a drinking vessel. Here's one of my cups. It is the skills that you need to make a successful cup also will let you make a successful vase or bowl or something like that. So it's a good basic object to master, and they're not too big and they don't take too long. So this is a cup that has really fine blue lines twisted around it. I'm not sure if that even reads. It's almost too fine for the photograph to show on my screen correctly, but that blue haze is actually really fine blue lines. And then this is another cup that has a spiral wrap of a pale blue going all the way around from the lip to almost down to the bottom. I find cups interesting to work on because there are a lot of aspects. How is it going to feel in the hand? What kind of liquid is it intended for? The proportions, the thickness, the weight. There's a lot of subtlety to cups that I didn't appreciate before I started making them. And then these are some cups that are made with a more complicated technique. It's called cane. Are you guys all able to see me, or are you just seeing the shared screen? I'm just wondering because I'm holding up a cane. It's a stripe, kind of like a strip of orange glass that has clear around it. For the cups that I'm showing there, there's a white stripe with transparent green over it and then some clear glass in between. And these canes can be assembled to make a vessel.
We can see you, Michelle.
Okay, I wasn't sure. And then this is another pair of cane cups with multicolored canes. And this was my my first and only time working as a hand model. Actually, not really. The photographer was taking a photo, and I reached to adjust the cup just at the moment as she pressed the shutter. So I, there's my hand model shot. This cup is made with a kind of glass called opaline. It's sort of a milky white, but I love it because the light comes through it. It's not completely opaque. And then this is a little martini glass, just made out of clear glass. This is a surprisingly challenging shape to make. I feel like even though I've been blowing glass for 20 years, I'm still learning how to get better at it, how to refine my technique. And then with glass blowing, the way you get better at it is by making the same thing or similar objects over and over and over again. So this is a set of twisted cups with feet on them, where I was trying to practice that twisting technique. And then this is a goblet made out of that same opaline glass. And then this is one of my fancier goblets. I'm not a glass blower who has specialized in goblet making. There are people who do specialize in that, and they make the most amazing things. This is just one of the goblets I've made that I'm really happy with. I like the way that the twisty stripes worked out and the scale of the cup to the foot and so on. And there's another angle of it where you can see some of the detail a little better. And this one also has that opaline glass in it. It's just thinner, so you don't get quite as strong a white. There's another shot. And this is another type of goblet. This is a technique called reticello. I have not mastered this technique yet, but it's a very kind of characteristic Italian glass technique where you make one set of, or you pick up one set of canes, twist it in one direction, and then you stuff another set of canes, twist it in the other direction. And what happens is you kind of, where the canes cross, you catch a little bubble in the middle. So in this picture, you can see the tiny little bubbles that I succeeded in catching pretty much in every intersection of this cup. Once you learn how to make cups, you would think it would be, pretty easy to make a bowl. What is a bowl? Well, it's kind of like a short cup that's maybe a little wider and maybe a little flared out. But there's a lot of subtlety to making bowls as well. So this bowl was made with the same blue stripes as the first cup I showed. When you're doing all the work of making cane and then forming the cane into a sheet that you can then roll up to make a blown object, there's a lot of work involved before you finally get around to making your object. So one of the techniques also from Italian glass blowers is making a cane roll up that you then chop into little pieces and you can make multiple objects out of. So out of the same roll up that I made that blue twisty cup, I think I made 4 other cups. I made this bowl and I made 1 or 2 other things, and I still have some pieces left. So you do the work, the setup work once, and then you can make a number of objects. And it's also a great way if you want to make matching sets, if you wanted to make a set of 8 bowls with the same kinds of stripes or something like that. It's a very useful technique. This is another bowl I made. It is also a cane-based technique. The design is called wig-wag because it waves back and forth. This is my flame wig-wag bowl. There's a detail of it. And I just love the way glass can block the light, transmit the light, where details can, or the glass itself can magnify details. And then this is a smoke wig-wag bowl. It's very similar technique, but it has a very different effect. Instead of using strong hard colors, I used little chunks of the dark gray / black color. And when those get stretched out, it makes it almost looks like brush strokes of color. So I have a detail of this bowl as well, where you can really see that kind of brush stroke effect of all the tiny little bits of the dark glass stretched on the clear. One of the things I like about working with glass is once you learn a little bit about it, the piece almost tells the story of how it was made. The way the little chunks of black stretched out kind of, show the forming and the stretching and the fact that there's a clear core inside the black, because we can see through it and we can see where the color is concentrated, where the canes overlapped each other. And this is a cane related technique. This is a bowl that was made using what we call Menagerie. And I have some bags of Menagerie next to me. Canes are intended to be used or to be viewed laterally, but if you look in the cross section of a cane, of a wider cane, you'll see something, there we go, there's the camera, something like this. So what I have here is a little section of what I set up as a wider cane. I did not pull it as thin. And then I chopped it to form these little cross sections. And I can take a whole bunch of them in the same color or different colors, lay them next to each other. And you can kind of see how I took a pattern like this, and as I squished it together and heated it, the spaces in between the little round circles of glass kind of turn into hexagons. So I think that's a very, very pretty effect. Let me put this. Oh, and here's a big chunky section so that you can picture the kind of a longer, fatter cane that can then get chopped into those little tiles or little pieces to make Menagerie. This bowl is made with twisted cane. When you make cane, you can decide if you want to have your design, your twists. Like here's a type of twisted cane. Whoops, I have to remember to hold it up to my camera, not to my picture. This cane that I'm holding has clear all around the color. The bowl that we're looking at there has stripes. The stripes come all the way out to the edge, kind of more like this cane here. This one has fine white stripes. So that will determine whether you see clear bands in between each of the canes, or whether they knit right up next to each other, kind of like on this bowl. And this is a reticello bowl. It was made out of some of the leftover cane from that goblet, the green and white goblet that I had shown earlier. Not all of my work has such fine lines and complicated details. A lot of my work is inspired by nature and natural materials and processes. So these bowls here remind me kind of stone with moss growing on it. And I like to work in series because I feel like I can refine not only my technique, but the color application. And they look pretty together. And this is another series. This is kind of moving more towards granite inspired. And then this is a completely different direction. This was, I did a workshop with a couple of glassblowers who are, amongst the best. They have the best reputation for teaching glass blowing techniques, Boyd Sujiki and Lisa Zerkowitz. And they make these very distinctive, or one of the things they make is these very distinctive striped bowls. So they were teaching us the technique. And then before you make something really fancy like this, it's helpful to practice the form over and over and over again. So this is what we in glassblowing call a low bowl. A bowl with lower, gently curving sides is one of the hardest forms to make consistently. That's another low bowl. I had intended it to be a little lower, but I just couldn't get there. And that's a low footed bowl. And just more bowls and bowls and bowls and bowls. I've made so many bowls. One of my favorite things to make is vases. One of the things I like about vases is you can imagine them full of flowers or branches or grasses or whatever, but they can also be just sculptural objects on their own. This is one of my fairly early vases. It's a twisted pattern. And the vase itself is also flattened. It's not a rounded form. It has kind of an oval cross section. So for a while, almost every vase I made was flattened. And then the trick when you flatten it is to have it still be able to stand upright and to have the lip and the base be in alignment and not, not a few degrees off of each other, because then it just doesn't quite look right. This is another one. This flattened vase form was made using cane. This was a red over clear with clear over the entire cane, so that gives that spacing effect. Because it has a fair amount of transparency and it's twisted and it's flattened, you get that same kind of cross pattern, but there's no contact between the layers, so there's no bubbles trapped in there, unlike the reticello. This is yet another direction. This vase was made. So the shiny parts, the leaves, that's the kind of like the regular glassy surface you get without any additional, treatment of the glass after it's cold. What I did with this one was I took a masking material. There's a material they call buttercut, and a pencil, and I drew some leaves and I cut it out with an X-Acto knife. And wherever I stuck those buttercut leaves on the vase, that's where you see the shiny leaves. And then I sandblasted the vase to get that kind of matte finish of the background. So that's one of my favorite pieces. And this is yet another vase that uses kind of complicated techniques for how simple it looks. This is made with encolmo. It's an Italian word, and it means, well, I don't know the literal translation of the Italian, but it's basically joining bubbles. So I had made the golden yellow bubble on a blowpipe, and then I opened up the end of it, and then I had made the a reddish orange bubble, and I opened up the end of it, and I joined them together, and that gives me the red orange stripe. And then I took yet another bubble and opened it up of the golden yellow and attached it on the end. Then I got a layer of clear glass over that, and I made this vase. And I made this out at Pilchuck Glass School, which is a very famous glass school out on the West Coast. And one of the students in my class was kind of laughing at my vase, and he said, "You know, it looks like Winnie the Pooh." And I said, "I love Winnie the Pooh." So I decided to make this a honey vase. So I did a similar technique with the buttercut type masking material. And this time I cut out where I wanted the letters to go, as opposed to cutting out. In the other case, I cut out the leaves. And in this case, I was using kind of like the negative space of the letters, and I sandblasted the letters honey into this vase. And then I rubbed a high temperature glass enamel into the area that I had sandblasted. So it really only stuck where it had been sandblasted. And then I brought it up to a high temperature in an annealing oven and cooled it back down. And so now I have a honey pot. This is another cane vase. This is a technique called switched axis. So normally when you're working with cane, you're working with a bunch of stripes that lie next to each other. But if you take something that is made out of a bunch of straight stripes and you twist it, you get a kind of a swirl pattern. But that swirl pattern would be hidden on the very bottom of the vase and would be distorted by where I open the lip of the vase. So what I did was I switched the axis of the twisted stripes by opening a hole in the side and attaching a blowpipe there, attaching a blowpipe to where you see where the current lip of the vase is. And the swirl that is facing out from the center of the vase, that would have been the bottom. So I switched it almost 90 degrees. And I don't have that vase here right now, but I do have a similar vase. If I did not explain that clearly enough, you can ask questions at the end and I can pull out another example and try to explain it better. More vases. This vase and the one that the vessel that come after it were inspired by a scientist, artist, glass worker named Jane Cook. She's done all kinds of experimentation with, embedding different materials in glass. Normally, when we start blowing glass, everybody's trying to make their glass as smooth and pure and bubble-free and perfect as possible. But Jane has inspired me to experiment with putting different metals and inclusions in the glass. And you can only do that with certain materials. If you mix them with the glass, the coefficient of expansion doesn't match. And you can make an object that way, but chances are it'll crack before it comes out of the annealer. So this one is a vase that has aluminum foil embedded in the glass. It doesn't look like aluminum foil. It looks more like bronze or something like that. But a lot of times there are chemical reactions that happen when you put different materials in glass. You can use silver or gold, but you can also use aluminum foil and a bunch of other materials. This one is also aluminum foil. And this one was very tough to make because I was trying to make kind of like a tall bowl or a basket, but all the metal in there, it heats up and cools at a different rate than the glass. And I made this one a little thin, and it just becomes very challenging to control. So I'm just pleased that I was able to finish that one at all. This is kind of like a cooling tower shaped vase. I love this shape. It is kind of like I said about cups at the very beginning, where there's a lot to think about in terms of proportion and, the height and the width and, how it feels in the hand. These cooling tower shapes are also really challenging, especially if you're trying to do something like have the base and the lip of the vessel be kind of balanced out with each other. Let's see. This one, this is another vase. This is kind of, this is the Aurora series, like the Aurora Borealis. This was just a kind of a playful experiment. I was trying to make vines with leaves on top of a vase. And then these were just some experiments in shape and different volume, different folds. These were also made with in a workshop with Boyd Suzuki and Lisa Zerkowitz. They're pretty influential on my glass blowing. Let's see. All right, this is one of my favorite vase forms to make. This is the Jack in the Pulpit. I like how, so I think pretty much everything I've shown up until this point was rotationally symmetric. And these are most definitely, they have left-right symmetry, but they're not rotationally symmetric, and that makes them a lot more challenging. Here's another one, and I wanted to show you, whoops, overshot a little bit. This is a side view of one of those vases. So not only do you have the kind of like the forming of that lip, but how is it going to stand? When I first started making these, I had a really hard time getting the balance right so that it wasn't leaning forward or backwards. But I make them in all different sizes. I think the smallest one here is about 4 inches and the tallest one is about 14 inches. It's one of my favorite forms to make. This is another flattened vessel. This one was after it came out of the annealer, after it was made, I sandblasted it and then hand pumiced it, and that gives it that really velvety look. This is kind of like a sunset landscape. And this was a collaborative piece I did. Somebody I know, a woman named Mariana Lintz, does a lot of glass cutting and fusing. I'll show you an example of a fused piece in a little while, but she basically, we talked about color and placement, and she made this fused sheet, which I then heated up and rolled up to make this vase. So that's kind of a little peek at the process. This looks like stained glass, and the glass that was used to fuse this together could be used in stained glass pieces, but you can't just take any piece of cold, glass that's a candidate for being stained glass and do this technique. You have to use glasses that are compatible with each other in terms of their coefficient of expansion, so that they don't crack when you assemble them together. This is the piece on the right is the one that I had on the punty rod in that very first picture that I showed. This was a pair of pieces that I made for a show at the Sandwich Glass Museum. They did an invitational. They had a bunch of artwork that was donated to the museum, and they invited different glass artists to come and interpret the works. So the piece I chose to interpret was a lithograph by Miro. It was called Sculptures, which I thought, it was a 2D work depicting sculptures. So I made a 3D work that I called Pictures, and I used some of the symbolism from that. This is another cane piece, twisted cane. Here's once again some pieces of twisted cane so you can get an idea of how it might have been made. But what I was playing with on this piece was sometimes less is more. Instead of having like a complete set of stripes going all the way around, I left some gaps, and that leaves those intriguing little windows where there are no stripes. And this is a Menagerie piece. Actually, I think it was made with some of the cousin Menagerie from where I made, when I made all this Menagerie. Probably this bag worth. Kind of like two different kinds of white circles. And then I'll go through some sculptural work. There's not as much of that, so hopefully I won't keep you all too long tonight. Shells. I enjoy making glass shells. I'd like to get back to doing that. I haven't been doing that recently. Right now we're making a lot of pumpkins for the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch at MIT. That's our big fundraiser for the year. This is my octopus. And this is a starfish on a stone. That's a hollow blown glass stone. I love making starfish. They're a lot of fun. It took me a while to be able to see 5-way symmetry. Halves and quarters and even thirds came pretty naturally to me, but fifths did not. So one of the things I like about glass is that you can make it look like so many other materials. So these are more blown stones. And then just a cairn of stones. I've done some leaves and plant work. Apples are another favorite thing that I make. The ones there are sandblasted, but sometimes I keep them shiny. So this is a shiny red apple. And then the pumpkins, I keep referencing pumpkins. The studio where I work, the MIT Glass Lab, for the past 20 years, 22 years, I don't remember exactly. They have been they make pumpkins as a fundraiser to, pay for the materials and equipment. And so I've made thousands of pumpkins. And then a couple of other projects, I'll just touch on these. These are some of the things that I've done, glass blowing related. Because of my relationship with the Sandwich Glass Museum, I'm a board member there. I was invited to be a co-curator of an exhibition that was the different people involved in the MIT Glass Lab. So I did not make this rocket ship. I love the rocket ship. That was made by an artist named Caitlin Becker. But this is something like a 60-something page catalog, and I read it 13 or 14 times beginning to end, editing it, because I'm the attention to detail person. And I co-curated that with Peter Hauk, who's the director of the Glass Lab, and with Dorothy Schoenfeld, who is the curator for the Sandwich Glass Museum. This is another fused glass piece. This was kind of like a cutting exercise. I was learning how to cut glass, so I wanted to see if I could make all these tiny little cuts accurately enough for my pattern to carry. I think I did pretty okay, although I have some ideas of what I'll do better next time. This is approximately 5 by 7 by 1.5 inch thick piece that was made out of stacked pieces of sheet glass that had little chunks of black frit, making a circle, and the circle slowly rises from the back to the front. And this is yet another technique that I've been learning. We used a CNC machine. We designed on a computer and then used a CNC machine, which it's kind of like an electronically controlled drill press with a, where the bit moves. And on the left side, you see my test wooden mold. On the right side, it's the design is cut into graphite, and in the center, I poured hot glass into the graphite mold, and that is how the piece came out. And this is another version of that with a circular design. And then I have an obligatory cat photo, because I don't think any presentation would be complete without a picture of a cat, a dog, a baby. So this is my cat helping me get ready for selling, for the holiday sales with my Christmas ornaments. That's Hunter, and he was helping me sort the ornaments. And then I have some frequently asked questions. Let me check the time. Yeah, I'll go through these kind of quickly. Although if anybody has further questions, I can, or wants further detail, I can come back to it. When people find out I'm a glass blower, they always ask, how often do you burn yourself? You probably burn yourself a lot, don't you? Well, if I burnt myself that much, I probably would not still be blowing glass. It's kind of like maybe being a chef, a professional chef. To a certain extent, you get used to the heat, and minor burns come with the territory, but you learn how to move in the studio and how to protect yourself. And I have a very healthy respect for the heat. So I don't burn myself that often. A much more common injury is cutting myself on the very sharp ends of cane and marini when I'm working with those techniques. People think that you have to blow really, really hard to blow glass, and your lungs must be really strong. And that's not true at all. If the glass is hot enough, it actually takes very little air pressure to blow the glass. The hardest part is getting the bubble started. It's kind of like blowing up a balloon, where the initial blowing, you have to kind of like overcome the surface tension and get it started. And then once it's started, it goes a lot easier. People always want to know, how do you get the color in there? The color in all the glass that I make comes from, well, we order it from different companies that basically melt different metals and metal oxides in glass in a concentrated form. And if you look at one of my pieces, if you were to kind of break a piece or look at it in cross section, the layer of color is actually very thin compared to the clear glass that is typically on both sides. So it's kind of like you take your clear glass, and it's kind of like picking up jimmies or sprinkles on your ice cream cone. If your glass is hot, the little bits of color will stick to it, and you just melt them in. So that's how we get the color in there. At MIT, we do not melt our own colors. It would be super fun to do so. There's a lot of science that we could play with in terms of melting colors, but you also have to be really careful, because nobody wants to breathe powdered cobalt or selenium or whatever the different metals are that you might want to put in to make a particular color. We just don't have the space or the materials handling capabilities in our lab to do that. So I have not had a chance to do that yet. How are you blowing glass during the pandemic? How is that safe? Well, for 6 months, I was not able to blow glass. they brought us back in slowly. It's a very limited group of people who are allowed to blow glass together. We wear masks the whole time. We stay 6 feet or more apart, except when we have to be closer together for whatever work we're doing. And we have alternative inflation devices. Nobody blows into a blowpipe anymore to start a bubble or to expand a bubble. We have compressed air as one option with a special fitting that will attach to our blowpipe to do the inflation. And another option we have is a little hand pump that's kind of like the blood pressure cuff pump. So we found ways to blow glass that we may actually continue using even after we're through this pandemic, because in some ways they are superior. Now there's still some techniques where like I want to be able to blow into a mold and then suck to extract from the mold. Haven't quite figured out how to do that in a pandemic safe way yet, but hopefully that'll be coming soon. So, oh yeah, and I can't remember if I mentioned, we get tested weekly and we have very limited partners. And unfortunately, I cannot bring any of you as guests into the lab right now because of those COVID rules. But I would be happy, you know, if anybody wants to get in touch afterwards, once MIT is allowing us to have outside visitors again, I would be happy to give a tour and a demo. So anyway, how did I learn how to blow glass? It was actually through the Cambridge Center for Adult Education. I took a one-day paperweight making workshop. And that's all it took to get me hooked. It was like one class. The studio was in Cambridge, was called Cambridge Glass School at that time, on Sherman Street in Cambridge. There's still a studio there. They're now called, the school is called NOCA, North Cambridge Glass School. If you want to learn how to blow glass, I recommend them very highly. So after that one-day class, then I signed up for a 6-week series and then another 6-week series. I started renting studio time and dropping in on other studios so I could watch and learn, and volunteering so that I could just be around people who knew how to blow glass. And now I teach glass blowing. So how can you learn how to blow glass? There's a lot of studios that have make your own experiences. If you've never done it before, it's kind of like equivalent to my paperweight making workshop, the one that I took. You can, you know, make a pumpkin, make a heart, make a flower, make a beer glass or something like that. So you can look for studios or museums that have glass studios. A lot of them have those make your own experiences. But there's also a lot of, there's great videos available online. You know, if you want to learn how, you know, how to make a cane vase or something like that, you can just search that on YouTube and you'll find tons of videos of people making things. There's some great books. This is one of my favorite authors, Ed Schmid. He's a glass blower and a glass blowing teacher, and he has these wonderful books that are hand illustrated and handwritten. He doesn't like writing using a computer, so he doesn't. I recommend his books very highly. And he's a really nice guy. If you ever have a chance to take a class with him, he does teach at different studios from time to time. And where can you see my work in person? I have a bunch of work online and also in the store at the gallery at 57, which is 57 Pleasant Street here in Malden. They are our partners in this particular talk. Thanks to the gallery at 57 for nominating me for giving this talk. And another great place to see tons of my work is the MIT Glass Lab has on-campus sales. There's a Mother's Day sale, there's a holiday sale in December, and there's the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch. Unfortunately, for the past, going on year and a half, those sales have not happened. But if you sign up for their email list, you'll get the announcements of the sales. It's a pretty low volume list. So that would be another place to see my work. And I also have some work like at the Snow Farm sale and the Fuller Craft Museum and a couple of other local places. But I really wanted to highlight both the gallery at 57 and the MIT Glass Lab sales are the places where you can see like the widest range of my work. And thanks for tuning in. So that's what I've got. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I'm going to take a moment and just have a sip of water.
So Michelle, there are definitely a few questions. People have been typing in the chat. I'll start them off for you.
Okay.
Mary Lynn asks, as it said, when she lived in Mexico in the 60s, most of the glass blowers were children and the glass fibers ruined their lungs. How has tech evolved to avoid that?
Well, yeah, I don't know what type of glass they were melting. It's possible that they were, in a facility that was, recycling glass bottles. There are a lot of studios around the world where they'll take like glass beer bottles. Let me see if I can get back to where I can see y'all because you just disappeared.
Well, I just spotlighted you. That's why.
Oh, okay. That's why.
So everyone can see you when you're talking.
I thought I did something.
No, that was me.
Okay. So it's possible that what the children were having problems from being exposed to either to like the glass that was being ground up to be melted or from the raw materials like silica, the silica sand that is melted to make glass. When it's in powdered form is really bad for your lungs. You may have heard that, people who are working in like the kitchen counter industry where they're making, quartz and silica and glass counters and they're everything's cut to fit, that the people who are doing the cutting are having a lot of lung problems. That might be what was the problem for those children. In the facility where I work, we melt what is called cullet. It's little chunks of glass that are already, preformed. They have all the materials in it, the potash, the lime, the silica, kind of pre-melted, and we just, we throw it in our furnace and melt it in that form. So we're not exposed to silica powder or ground glass. So I think it's a lot safer.
Okay. Mary Lynn also asked, have you ever watched the glass blowers in Shelburne Falls along the Deerfield River?
Yeah, I've been to Shelburne Falls and I have watched the glass blowers there. It's one of my favorite things to do whenever I'm traveling. Is to see whether there's any glass studios in the area, so I can, drop by and watch and learn. It's funny, there are glasses. It's kind of like a small world. After a while, you get to know a lot of people. I mean, I certainly don't know everybody, but I've been out to Josh Simpson's studio out in Western Mass, and yeah, that's a really beautiful area to visit, and there's several glass studios out there.
Nice. Marilyn asked, at what point in the process do you add incorporated material?
Well, the pieces that I had shown with the aluminum foil, I would make a bubble, and I think I mean, I made a bubble. I picked up some finely ground blue glass to give kind of like a background color. And then I literally, I heated that and I rolled onto aluminum foil. And then I got another layer of clear glass on top of that. Now, if you're going to play around with anything like that, you have to be very careful because for aluminum foil in particular, the melting temperature is a lot lower than we work the glass. So you can end up with little bits of molten aluminum, like contaminating everything. It's like contaminating your tools and your surfaces and stuff like that. So you just want to, be aware that can happen and be prepared to clean it up if you're doing it in, in a shared studio, a studio that's not your own.
Celia was mentioning she has an MIT pumpkin, and she was wondering if it's yours. She bought it probably about 20 years ago.
Well, if it was 20 years ago, I was just getting started. So I might have been staff at the sale, but you probably, unless it was, 14 to 16 years ago, that's probably my oldest pumpkins. I have some, my house is full of glass, but in particular, this is a pumpkin that I made, I think like right before the shutdown. So this, this is, it's a cane pumpkin. It's very fancy, fancy pumpkin. But I've literally made thousands of pumpkins over the years. And I still find it fun to do. Some people get bored of making the same thing over and over again, but I find it's a great opportunity for me to improve my skills.
Nice. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi. How much science do you need to know, or have you picked up in your work at the MIT? I mean, you're talking about coefficients of different materials and things like that. Obviously, it's a component of your work, but it doesn't sound like that's where you started.
Well, it's kind of funny because I didn't. I mean, I have a degree in computer science from MIT. I used to work in, the abstract world of software development. I also have a degree from MIT in literature, of all things. So I didn't go to art school like many of my colleagues. But the answer is, you don't really need to know a lot of science. But it kind of comes with the territory. It seems like most glassblowers who stick with it, whatever background they come from, whether they're coming at it from art or craft or, just hands-on working with material, or from science or engineering, you kind of pick up some along the way. Like you have to understand annealing cycles, so that you can, after you form a piece of hot glass, you can't just put it on the counter and let it cool down to air temperature. It needs to be, held at a certain temperature and then cooled slowly, so that it allows the stresses in the glass to be relieved. And you can understand it at that level, or you can understand it at the, more at the molecule level of the molecules, rearranging themselves, or, there's different ways you can learn it, but you have to understand those basic concepts. a lot of glass blowers become tinkerers because they need to, there's something wrong with their annealer. They don't know what's happening. They have to figure out how to like wind a replacement coil because it's too expensive to, like call somebody in. And it's not like you can just call your appliance repair guy and have him come and, fix your annealer. So I think that people who stick with glass blowing kind of, want to do that kind of, or are able to do that kind of tinkering, debugging, figuring out, what is it doing? What do I want it to do? What happened? What went wrong? How can I fix it? And these days there's, a lot of information available online. There's Facebook groups, Instagram, groups, whatever, where people are constantly asking questions. I'm thinking about buying this new, electric furnace. Who has experience with, this type of heating element or, this type of controller? So there's a fair amount of kind of maintaining your own equipment, because it's not just like you can go to the, the appliance store down the street to get what you need.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question. So when you start a new technique, how long does it take for you to feel confident that you know how something's going to turn out? Because it feels like this is so kind of magical what happens. And I think obviously you must know what you're expecting to get when you're done, but it seems so hard to predict to me as somebody who's never done it and have no idea, but it looks so amazing.
Oh, and if I can add to that, like, how often do you get a happy accident? Like, you expect it to come out one way and then it comes out different, but it's awesome.
Well, sometimes you get a happy accident and sometimes you get an unhappy accident. And it really depends what, how challenging the thing is. Like if you're trying to make something that's really fancy and intricate and thin and delicate, the timing is much more sensitive. That might, you might have 100 things fall off the punty rod and, break on the floor before you make your first successful one. But for other things, it depends how closely related it is to something I've done before. It depends how in practice my hands are, like if I've been working on making larger things and I'm trying to make something larger but different, I'll probably be more successful than if I had been making, little, delicate, apples or starfish for weeks and weeks. And then, I try to make something, large and different. And I guess, the answer is it really depends. And sometimes you just don't know until you try.
Well, my final comment is that everything is just so gorgeous and so different from each other. And it's been so wonderful to see everything presented in one presentation. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Oh, thanks, Monique. Yeah, it was, I feel like I've only scratched the surface. I could probably do a whole nother presentation with a whole different series of work, but honestly, these are the pictures of things where I had good pictures. I have some other pieces that I also really like. I just didn't have, I was selecting the best pictures of my favorite pieces. So, yeah, and I had, when I was originally asked, I wanted to do more of, something that would incorporate video where I could maybe actually demonstrate something like how to make a pumpkin or how to make a starfish. But because of COVID rules, I can't even invite like a family member to come into the studio and run a camera for me. The rules on campus are very strict. you know, for their COVID protocols, and so I wasn't able to shoot any video. Maybe next year.
That would be great. Any other questions for Michelle?
I might have one if it's not too complicated to explain without us being able to see you do it, but I'm really curious about the shell. That shape, how do you make that?
Well, let's see. I'm looking across my dining room at a shell. Maybe if I go and grab one, I can explain. Oh, my husband is going to hand it to me. Upper, yeah, the corner. Yes, that one. So I only showed a picture from one angle of the shell, but oh, and he's kind enough to dust it before handing it to me. So the shell, it's a little bit of an optical illusion. So first of all, it's hollow. I don't know if you can see that, how it's open inside there. It looks like it has a spiral pattern, but it doesn't really. It actually has a series of lines. So it was kind of like a cone-shaped bubble in which I put a series of lines that give the illusion of a spiral. And then on this side here, that's kind of like, I don't know, what would be a good example? I would grab my drinking glass, except it's full of water. If I held it up like this, I would have a mess. So basically, I took, we can pretend that this vase here is the bottom of the shell. I essentially, while it was still hot, I took my shears and I cut into it so that I had like a loose flap. And then that flap, one side of that flap, I twisted it around really tightly to make this little spiral bit. And the other side of that flap, I kind of stretched open and then gave it this little ridge. So the shell has a spot to sit on. So that's kind of how the shell is made. There's a little more to it than that, because you kind of have to hold it from one end and then hold it from the other end with your tools, because you can't just do this with your hands when it's hot. But there's like little clues, like there's like this little melty bit at the end here. This end was attached to a metal rod at one point. And when I was finally finished with the bottom of the shell, I did what we call torching it off. I was torching it. My assistant had some Kevlar gloves, and they basically caught it, and I torched the end. And then it went into the annealer. So that's yeah, shells are fun and challenging. There's some people who specialize in making shells. Shells are one of those things where when I try to make them, I'll probably get a few really awkward ones before I get a good one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Michelle?
Well, thank you all for listening. I feel like this is one of those topics where I'm in danger of providing far more information than any of my audience wants. So once you get me started,
this was great.
Oh, thank you. It was wonderful, Michelle.
It's really
and
good.
for anyone that wants to watch this, or if you know of anyone that, if you missed part of this, or if there's anyone that wanted to see it but couldn't, we are recording this and it will be on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go and look at that, or tell anyone that wanted to see it but couldn't. And our next Arts After Dark it will be on May 6th with Rosemary Chimganda. She makes traditional African and Indonesian batik using cornmeal porridge, and I can't wait to see that one. That intrigues me too. And so thank you again so much, Michelle, for doing this with us and sharing your art. Is so interesting. It's been a while since I've seen blown glass demonstration. I actually grew up in Western New York, so I went to Corning Museum of Glass many times as a kid. It's changed since then, but it's when there was still the Corningware and the Storyban glass was still being made. That's how far back I go. But it was just fascinating to see everything that you make, and yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And I've been out to the Corning Museum, the studio there, to take classes. You know, in a normal year, I try to get out there at least twice a year. It's one of my favorite places in the world. It's my home away from home. And I just wanted to throw a shout out to the gallery at 57. They're having an event this Sunday. It's an Earth Day event. It's going to be from noon to 3 p.m. rain or shine. They tell me they've got tents, you know, because it's probably going to be rain, but we do want to celebrate the earth. The earth needs the rain. So yeah, if you can make it there, that, you know, I recommend it.
That'd be great. What time is the show?
12 to 3.
It's from noon to 3 p.m. And I think there's going to be a series of like demos and hands-on opportunities, and seedling planting, and like upcycled box making and various projects. So yeah,
I'll be there
for
doing
kids and
some,
adults.
I'll be doing some mosaic making, so I get the other end of the glass spectrum from you. The very cold glass.
Very nice.
All right.
Anyway, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone. I wish you all a good evening, a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you again, Michelle. Bye.
Bye.